The frozen earth beneath Katherine Calloway's knees bit through her worn skirts as she knelt beside the freshly turned grave, tears streaming down her wind-chapped face, despite the December cold that should have frozen them before they fell. She had buried her father 3 hours ago in ground so hard the gravediggers had demanded double payment. And now she was alone in a world that showed no mercy to women without protection in the Idaho Territory winter of 1878. The cemetery on the hill overlooking Ruby City stretched before her in solemn rows, each wooden cross a testament to the harsh reality of frontier life. And Katherine wondered if she would join these silent residents before spring came to thaw the unforgiving land. "Miss, you are going to catch your death out here." The voice came from behind her, deep and concerned, carrying a slight drawl that marked its owner as a man who had traveled far from southern states. Katherine did not turn, did not acknowledge the stranger who had somehow approached without her hearing his footsteps in the snow. Her tears continued falling onto the mound of earth that covered Thomas Calloway, the only family she had known since her mother died bringing her into this world 22 years ago. "Death would be a mercy," she whispered, her voice cracking with grief and cold. She heard the crunch of boots in snow as the man came closer, then felt the weight of a heavy coat settle across her shoulders. The warmth of it, still holding the heat from his body, made her realize just how deeply the cold had penetrated her bones. "Your father would not want you freezing beside his grave," the stranger said, his tone gentle but firm. "Come on now, let me help you up." Katherine finally looked up at the man who stood beside her, offering his hand. He was tall and broad-shouldered, perhaps 26 or 27 years old, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his worn hat. His eyes were a striking shade of gray-blue, like storm clouds over distant mountains, and they held a kindness that seemed out of place in a territory where most men looked at a woman alone with calculation rather than compassion. His face was weathered by sun and wind, strong-featured and honest, with a few days' growth of beard shadowing his jaw. "I do not know you," she said, though she took his hand and allowed him to pull her to her feet. Her legs had gone numb from kneeling so long, and she stumbled against him. He caught her easily, steadying her with his other hand at her elbow. "Name is Samuel Quinton," he said, keeping his hold on her until she found her balance. "I have been working at the Clearwater Ranch since October. I heard about your father passing, and I thought someone should check that you were not out here alone in this cold." Katherine pulled his coat tighter around herself, knowing she should return it but unable to bear the thought of losing its warmth. "Katherine Calloway," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Quinton, but I have nowhere to go. My father and I lived in a cabin on land he was claiming, but without him, I cannot work it. The bank will take it for the debts he owed, and I have no money for lodging in town." Samuel's expression darkened with concern. "Have you eaten today?" The question caught her off guard, and she realized she could not remember when she had last had a proper meal. "I am not hungry," she lied, but her treacherous stomach chose that moment to growl audibly. "That settles it," Samuel said, his tone brooking no argument. "You are coming with me to town, and we are getting some hot food in you. After that, we will figure out what comes next." But standing in a cemetery freezing and starving is not going to solve anything, Miss Calloway. Katherine knew she should refuse, should maintain some shred of propriety, but the truth was she had no options left. She had spent the last of her money on her father's burial, and the cabin was 3 miles outside town with no firewood left and no food in the cupboards. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. "Very well," she said quietly, "but I will repay you for the meal when I am able." "No repayment needed," Samuel said, offering his arm. "Just consider it one neighbor helping another." She took his arm, grateful for the support as they made their way down the hill toward Ruby City. The town spread out below them. A collection of wooden buildings clustered along the main street, with smoke rising from chimneys into the gray December sky. Ruby City had sprung up during the gold rush of the 60s, and though the easy gold was gone, enough miners and ranchers remained to keep the town alive. Katherine had lived in the area her whole life, watching the town grow and change. But she had never felt as disconnected from it as she did now, walking beside a stranger who seemed to be the only person who cared whether she lived or died. Samuel led her to a small restaurant on Main Street, a place called Martha's Kitchen that Katherine had passed 100 times but never entered. The warmth hit her like a physical force when they stepped inside, and the smell of cooking food made her head spin with sudden hunger. A plump woman with graying hair looked up from where she stood behind the counter, her eyes taking in Katherine's tear-stained face and Samuel's coat around her shoulders. "Samuel Quinton, is that you?" the woman said, wiping her hands on her apron. "And Katherine Calloway." "Oh, my dear child, I heard about your father. I am so very sorry for your loss." "Thank you, Martha," Katherine said, recognizing the woman now as someone who had occasionally bought eggs from her father when they had laying hens. "That is kind of you to say." "Sit down, both of you," Martha said, gesturing to a table near the stove. "I've got beef stew and fresh bread, and I will not hear any arguments about payment. Consider it my condolence gift, Katherine." Samuel pulled out a chair for Katherine, and she sank into it gratefully, her legs still shaking from cold and exhaustion. He sat across from her, studying her face with those storm-colored eyes. "When did you last sleep?" he asked bluntly. "I do not remember," Katherine admitted. "My father was sick for 2 weeks before he passed. I sat up with him most nights." Martha appeared with 2 steaming bowls of stew and a basket of bread so fresh it was still warm. "You eat every bite," she ordered Katherine. "You are nothing but skin and bones, girl." Katherine picked up her spoon with trembling hands and tasted the stew. It was rich and savory, thick with vegetables and tender chunks of beef, and she had to fight back tears at the simple comfort of hot food. She forced herself to eat slowly, though everything in her wanted to devour it like a starving animal. Samuel ate his own meal but kept watching her, and Katherine felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. Finally, she set down her spoon and met his gaze directly. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You do not know me and I am nothing to you." He was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "My mother died when I was 14, he said at last. "My father followed her a year later." "I know what it is to be alone in the world with no one to turn to, Miss Calloway. If someone had not helped me back then, I do not know where I would have ended up. Maybe dead in a ditch somewhere, or worse. I figure now that I am in a position to help someone else. I ought to do it." "Where are you from?" Katherine asked, hearing the story behind his words. "Tennessee," Samuel said. "Farm country. After my parents died, the farm went to pay debts, same as your situation. I worked odd jobs for a few years, then headed west when the war ended. Been drifting from place to place, working ranches mostly, learning the cattle trade. Ruby City is just another stop along the way." "And yet you saw a stranger in trouble and chose to help," Katherine said softly. "That speaks well of your character, Mr. Quinton." "Samuel," he corrected gently. "No need for formality between us, Katherine. May I call you Katherine?" She nodded, something warm unfurling in her chest at the sound of her name in his mouth. "Yes, of course." Martha returned to refill their coffee cups and place a slice of apple pie in front of each of them. "On the house," she said when Samuel started to protest. "I have known Katherine since she was a little thing. Her father was a good man, just unlucky. The least I can do is feed her properly." When Martha had returned to the kitchen, Samuel leaned forward, his expression serious. "We need to talk about what happens next," he said. "You cannot stay in that cabin alone, especially with winter setting in hard. Do you have any family elsewhere? Anywhere you could go?" Katherine shook her head. "My father was an only child, and my mother's family disowned her when she married him. They thought she was marrying beneath her station. After she died, my father tried to contact them, but they wanted nothing to do with me. Friends in town. A few acquaintances, but no one close enough to impose upon for housing," Katherine admitted. "My father and I kept to ourselves mostly. He was not a sociable man, especially after my mother died." Samuel ran a hand through his hair, clearly thinking through the problem. "The Clearwater Ranch where I work," he began slowly. "They might need help in the main house. The owner, Mr. Henderson, his wife has been looking for someone to help with cooking and cleaning. Their last hired girl got married and moved to Boise City last month. It would be room and board plus wages." Hope flickered in Katherine's chest, but she tamped it down, afraid to trust it. "Do you think they would truly consider me?" "I can ride out there this afternoon and ask," Samuel said. "The ranch is about 5 miles north of town. If Mrs. Henderson agrees, you could start tomorrow. It would give you a place to stay through the winter at least, and time to figure out what you want to do long term." "Why are you doing this?" Katherine asked again, searching his face for some hidden motive. In her experience, men did not help women without expecting something in return. Samuel held her gaze steadily. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because I see in you the same lost look I had in my own eyes all those years ago. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it most. I am just passing that kindness forward." Katherine felt tears welling up again, but this time they were not entirely born of grief. "I do not know how to thank you." "No thanks needed," Samuel said, finishing his coffee. "Just promise me you will not give up. Times are hard now, but they will get better. That is the nature of life on the frontier. You endure the hard winters, and eventually spring comes." Those words stayed with Katherine as Samuel left to ride out to the Clearwater Ranch. Martha insisted Katherine stay at the restaurant, keeping her by the warm stove and plying her with more coffee and conversation. The older woman shared news about the town, gossip about who was courting whom, complaints about the harsh winter, anything to keep Katherine distracted from her grief and uncertainty. 3 hours later, Samuel returned, snow dusting his shoulders and a smile on his face. "Mrs. Henderson would like to meet you," he said. "I told her about your situation, and she said any daughter of Thomas Calloway would be welcome at the ranch. She remembered your father from before you were born, said he once helped her husband track down stolen cattle." "When does she want to meet me?" Katherine asked, standing quickly. "Now, if you are willing," Samuel said. "I've got a wagon outside. We can have you out there before dark." Katherine looked down at her morning dress, wrinkled and stained from kneeling in the cemetery. "I am not exactly presentable." Martha waved a dismissive hand. "Clara Henderson is not the type to judge a woman by her dress, especially given the circumstances. You go on, dear, and Katherine, your father would be proud of you for not giving up." The ride to the Clearwater Ranch gave Katherine her first real chance to talk with Samuel. He drove the wagon with easy competence. The reins relaxed in his hands as the 2 horses pulled them along the snowy road. The landscape around them was beautiful in its stark winter way. Rolling hills covered in white, stands of pine trees dark against the pale sky, mountains rising in the distance. "Tell me about Tennessee," Katherine said, wanting to know more about the man who had appeared in her life like some kind of guardian angel. Samuel smiled, a faraway look in his eyes. "Green," he said. "Everything was green, even in winter, not like this cold white world. We had a small farm, maybe 40 acres, grew tobacco mostly, some corn. My parents worked themselves to the bone trying to make it profitable, but the land was poor and the market was uncertain. After my mother died, my father just lost heart. He kept working, but it was like watching a candle burn down. When he finally passed, I think it was as much from grief as anything else." "I understand that," Katherine said softly. "My father was never the same after my mother died. He loved this land, loved the idea of building something here in Idaho territory, but his heart was never fully in it after she was gone. I think he stayed alive this long for my sake, but once I was grown, he had no reason to keep fighting." "How old were you when your mother passed?" Samuel asked. "I never knew her," Katherine said. "She died in childbirth. My father used to tell me stories about her, though. She was from Boston, came west with her family when she was 16. Her parents were trying to establish a trading business in Portland, but she met my father at a social event and fell in love. Her family never approved of the match." "Their loss," Samuel said firmly. "From what I heard in town, your father was an honest, hard-working man. That counts for more than fancy family connections in my book." Katherine looked at him with growing curiosity. "You seem to have strong opinions about class and social standing." "I have seen enough of both sides to know that character matters more than bloodlines," Samuel said. "In Tennessee, we were poor farmers, looked down on by the plantation owners and town folk. But my parents were good people who worked hard and treated others fairly. That should count for something. Out here in the West, I appreciate that a man can make something of himself based on his own merits rather than who his grandfather was." "And what are you trying to make of yourself?" Katherine asked. Samuel was quiet for a moment, guiding the horses around a bend in the road. "I want my own ranch someday," he said finally. "Nothing huge, just enough land to run a decent herd of cattle, a house that does not leak when it rains. Maybe a family if I am lucky enough to find a woman willing to take a chance on a drifting cowboy." Something in his tone made Katherine's heart beat a little faster. She told herself not to be foolish, that Samuel was just being kind, that he probably said such things to many women. But the way he glanced at her as he spoke, the warmth in his eyes, suggested his words might hold more meaning than casual conversation. The Clearwater Ranch appeared before them as they crested a hill, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a valley with the Salmon River glinting silver in the distance. The main house was substantial, 2 stories of solid timber construction with smoke rising from 2 chimneys. Several outbuildings surrounded it, including a large barn, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, and various sheds and corrals. Cattle dotted the snowy fields, dark shapes against the white landscape, and Katherine could see several men working near the barn. "It is bigger than I expected," Katherine said, feeling suddenly nervous. "Henderson runs about 500 head," Samuel explained. "He has 8 hands working for him year-round, more during roundup and branding. It is one of the more successful operations in this part of Idaho territory. He treats his workers fairly and pays on time, which is more than you can say for some ranchers." Samuel drove the wagon up to the main house and helped Katherine down. Before they reached the porch, the front door opened and a woman emerged, wrapped in a thick shawl. Clara Henderson was perhaps 50 years old, with silver-streaked brown hair pulled back in a practical bun, and a face that showed the marks of a hard but satisfying life. Her eyes were kind but shrewd as she looked Katherine over. "Mrs. Henderson, this is Katherine Calloway," Samuel said, removing his hat. "Katherine, Clara Henderson." "Come inside, child," Clara said warmly, gesturing them through the door. You are frozen half to death, I can see it in your face. Samuel, you come too. I have got coffee on, and we can talk properly where it is warm. The interior of the house was everything the exterior promised. Well built and well maintained, with solid furniture and curtains at the windows. A fire crackled in the large stone fireplace, and the smell of baking bread filled the air. Clara led them to a sitting room and insisted they take seats near the fire before disappearing to fetch coffee. She seems kind, Katherine whispered to Samuel. She is, Samuel confirmed. Both the Hendersons are good people. You will be treated fairly here, Katherine. Clara returned with a tray holding 3 cups of coffee and a plate of cookies. She handed them around before settling into a chair across from Katherine, studying her with those shrewd eyes. Samuel tells me you just buried your father today, she said gently. I am sorry for your loss, my dear. Thomas Calloway was a good man. He helped my husband years ago when we first started this ranch, tracked down some cattle thieves who had hit several spreads in the area. Robert never forgot that kindness. Thank you, Katherine managed. I did not know that story. Your father was modest about his abilities, Clara said, but he was one of the best trackers in the territory back in his day. It is a shame he could not make his own claim work out, but farming is hard in this climate. Ranching is better suited to this land. She paused, sipping her coffee. Now, Samuel says you might be interested in a position here helping with housework. I will be honest with you, Katherine. The work is hard and the hours are long. I need someone who can cook for a household that includes me, my husband, and sometimes 1 or 2 of the hands who eat in the house, rather than the bunkhouse. Cleaning, laundry, helping with food preservation, tending the kitchen garden in summer. In return, you would have your own room, all meals, and $30 a month. $30 a month. It was more money than Katherine had ever had at one time. Combined with room and board, it was a generous offer. I can cook and clean, Katherine said quickly. My father taught me to make do with whatever we had. I can sew, mend clothes, tend a garden. I am a hard worker, Mrs. Henderson. I will not disappoint you. I am sure you will not, Clara said with a smile. When would you like to start? Whenever you need me, Katherine said. I have nowhere else to go, nothing else to do. My father's cabin will be taken by the bank soon enough, and everything in it was old and worn anyway. I have the clothes I am wearing and nothing else. Clara's expression softened with sympathy. Then we will need to do something about that. I have some dresses that might fit you, and we can alter them as needed. You can start tomorrow morning, which gives you tonight to rest and settle in. You look exhausted, child. I am, Katherine admitted, the events of the day catching up with her all at once. Between the burial, the emotional turmoil, and the cold, she felt wrung out and hollow. Samuel, show Katherine to the spare room upstairs, Clara instructed. Katherine, you make yourself at home. There is water for washing, and I will bring up something for you to change into. We will have supper in about 2 hours. Nothing fancy, just beef, roast, and vegetables, but you need a good meal. Samuel led Katherine upstairs to a small but comfortable room with a real bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the ranch yard. After weeks of caring for her dying father in their drafty cabin, the room seemed impossibly luxurious. Are you going to be all right? Samuel asked, lingering in the doorway. Katherine turned to face him, overwhelmed by everything that had happened. This morning, she had been utterly alone and hopeless, kneeling in frozen dirt with no future ahead of her. Now she had shelter, employment, and the kindness of strangers who expected nothing in return. And at the center of it all was this man, this cowboy with storm-colored eyes who had seen her pain and chosen to help. I do not know how to thank you, she said, her voice breaking. You saved my life today, Samuel Quinton. I was ready to give up, to let the cold and hunger take me. But you showed me there was still kindness in the world. Samuel crossed the room in 2 long strides and took her hands in his calloused palms warm against her cold skin. "Listen to me, Katherine Calloway," he said, his voice low and intense. "You are stronger than you know. You survived losing your mother at birth, grew up in a harsh land with only your father for company, nursed him through his final illness, and today you buried him in frozen ground. You did all that, and you are still standing. That takes a strength most people never have to find. I just pointed you in a direction. You did the hard part." Tears streamed down Catherine's face, but for the first time since her father died, they were not entirely tears of grief. There was hope mixed in now, fragile but real. "The frozen ground could not hold my tears," she whispered. They kept falling no matter how cold it was. Samuel squeezed her hands gently. "Then let me make you a promise," he said. "I do not know what the future holds, and I cannot guarantee everything will be easy. But I promise you this. I will do everything in my power to plant joy here, in this place where you have known so much sorrow. You deserve happiness, Katherine. You deserve a life that is more than just surviving." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning that went beyond simple kindness. Katherine looked up into Samuel's eyes and saw something there that made her breath catch. Not pity, not obligation, but genuine care, perhaps even the beginning of something deeper. "Why?" she asked for the 3rd time that day. "Why do you care so much about what happens to me?" Samuel smiled, a slow, warm expression that transformed his weathered face. "Because the moment I saw you kneeling beside that grave, tears freezing on your face, something in me recognized something in you. We are the same, you and I. Survivors. Fighters. People who have lost everything but refuse to let that loss define us. And maybe," he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, "maybe I care because I took one look at you and thought, there is a woman worth knowing, worth helping. Worth," he stopped, shaking his head. "I am sorry. This is not the time for such talk. You just buried your father." "No," Katherine said quickly, tightening her grip on his hands. "Do not apologize. Your words are the first good thing I have felt in weeks. Please do not take them back." They stood there in the small room, hands clasped, something electric and new passing between them. It was Clara's voice calling up the stairs that finally broke the moment, reminding Samuel that supper would be ready soon. "I should let you rest," Samuel said reluctantly. "But Katherine, I meant what I said, about all of it." After he left, Katherine sank onto the bed, her mind spinning. It was too soon, too fast, too much. She had buried her father that morning, and here she was thinking about a cowboy with kind eyes who made promises about planting joy. It was inappropriate. It was scandalous. It was completely improper. It was also the only thing keeping her from drowning in grief. Clara arrived shortly with an armful of clothes and a basin of warm water. "I heard you crying," the older woman said gently, setting everything down. "Grief is natural, Katherine. Do not try to hold it back, but also do not let it consume you. Your father would want you to live, to find happiness. Honor his memory by building a good life." "Did Samuel tell you what he said to me?" Katherine asked, curious about how much Clara knew. "He did not have to," Clara said with a knowing smile. "I saw the way he looked at you when he brought you here, and I saw the way you looked back. Samuel Quinton is a good man, Katherine. He has worked here for 3 months, and in that time he has proven himself to be honest, hardworking, and kind. My husband thinks highly of him. If something develops between you two, you could do far worse." "It is too soon," Katherine protested weakly. "My father has been dead less than a day." "The heart does not always follow proper schedules," Clara said wisely. "But no one is asking you to make any decisions right now. Take your time, grieve properly, settle into your new situation. If what I saw between you and Samuel is real, it will still be there when you are ready." Supper that evening was surprisingly pleasant, despite Catherine's emotional exhaustion. Robert Henderson turned out to be a gruff but kind man in his 50s, weathered by years of ranching but still vital and strong. He expressed his condolences for her father's death and welcomed her to the ranch with genuine warmth. Samuel sat across from Catherine at the large dining table, and she found herself sneaking glances at him throughout the meal, catching him doing the same. After supper, Samuel walked her back upstairs, carrying a lamp to light the way. At the door to her room, he paused. "I know today was terrible for you," he said quietly, "but I am glad you are here, Catherine, glad you are safe." "So am I," Catherine admitted. "Samuel, about what you said earlier about planting joy here, did you mean it?" "Every word," Samuel said seriously. "I do not make promises lightly, Catherine. When I give my word, I keep it." "Then I will hold you to that," Catherine said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Because I could use some joy in my life. I could use a reason to believe the future might be better than the past." "It will be," Samuel promised. "I will make sure of it." That night, Catherine lay in the comfortable bed and thought about everything that had happened. The morning had begun with such despair, such hopelessness. But now, lying in warmth and safety with a full stomach and the promise of employment, she felt the first stirrings of something she had not experienced in months: hope. And wound through that hope was the image of a cowboy with storm-colored eyes who had promised to plant joy in frozen ground. She fell asleep thinking about Samuel Quinton and wondering what tomorrow would bring. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm to Catherine's life. She rose before dawn each day to start breakfast for the household, cooking enormous meals of eggs, bacon, biscuits, and gravy for the Hendersons and any ranch hands who ate in the main house. After breakfast, she cleaned, did laundry, mended clothes, and prepared the midday and evening meals. The work was hard and constant, but Catherine found she did not mind. It kept her hands busy and her mind occupied, leaving less time to dwell on grief. Samuel worked the ranch with the other hands, riding out each day to check on cattle, repair fences, and handle the 100 tasks that kept a ranch running through winter. But he made a point of coming to the main house for meals whenever possible, and Catherine noticed that he often found reasons to be nearby when she was working. He would appear to help carry heavy laundry baskets or bring in firewood, always with that warm smile and those watchful eyes. They talked during these moments, brief conversations that gradually revealed more about each other. Catherine learned that Samuel had served briefly in the war when he was 17, though he did not like to discuss those days. He had spent the years since drifting west, working ranches in Missouri, Kansas, and Colorado before making his way to Idaho Territory. He was good with horses, skilled with a rope, and had a natural talent for understanding cattle that made him valuable to any rancher. Samuel learned that Catherine could read and write well, unusual for a woman on the frontier. Her mother had been educated in Boston, and her father had honored his late wife's wishes by teaching their daughter from the few books they owned. Catherine loved stories, though she had read the same dozen books so many times she had them nearly memorized. She had dreams once of seeing more of the world, of visiting the cities back east that her mother had described. But those dreams had faded as her father's health declined, and their circumstances grew more difficult. "Maybe you will still see those places someday," Samuel said one afternoon in late December, as he helped her hang laundry in the cold air. The clothes would freeze on the line but would dry eventually, the ice evaporating slowly in the winter sun. "I doubt it," Catherine said, pinning up one of Clara's dresses. Travel requires money I do not have and likely never will. Things can change, Samuel said. I never thought I would make it further west than Mississippi, but here I am in Idaho territory. Life is full of surprises. Katherine hung another dress before responding. Can I ask you something personal? Anything, Samuel said. Why are you still drifting? Katherine asked. You said you want your own ranch someday, but you are working for wages, moving from place to place. Why not settle somewhere and start building toward that goal? Samuel was quiet for a moment, holding a wet sheet while Katherine pinned it. I guess I have been waiting for the right place, he said finally. And maybe the right reason to put down roots. A ranch is a lot of work for one man alone. It would be easier with a partner, a wife, I mean. Katherine's hand stilled on the clothesline. Have you ever been close to marrying? Once, Samuel admitted. Back in Kansas. There was a girl, daughter of the rancher I worked for. She was pretty and sweet, and I thought maybe we had something. But when I asked her father for permission to court her, he laughed in my face, said his daughter was not going to throw herself away on a penniless drifter with no prospects. She married a shopkeeper from town 3 months later. I am sorry, Katherine said softly. That must have hurt. It did at the time, Samuel said. But looking back, I realize we were not right for each other anyway. She wanted security and status. I wanted adventure and freedom. We would have made each other miserable. He paused, then added quietly, I am waiting for someone who wants the same things I do. Someone who sees potential instead of limitations. Someone willing to build something from nothing alongside me. Katherine met his eyes across the laundry basket, and the look they shared held volumes of unspoken meaning. That seems like a reasonable thing to wait for, she said. I think so, Samuel agreed, a smile playing at his lips. Christmas came a week later, and Clara insisted on making it special despite the harsh winter. She enlisted Katherine's help in preparing a feast, and the house filled with the smells of roasting turkey, baking pies, and spiced cider. The Hendersons invited all the ranch hands to the main house for Christmas dinner, and the usually formal dining room became crowded and boisterous with cowboys eating and talking and laughing. Samuel sat next to Katherine during the meal, close enough that their shoulders brushed occasionally. Under the cover of the general noise and celebration, they talked quietly, sharing stories about Christmases past. Katherine told him about the year her father had carved her a wooden doll, spending weeks on the project in secret. Samuel described a Christmas in Tennessee when his mother had somehow managed to make sugar cookies, despite their poverty, using ingredients she had saved for months. After dinner, Robert Henderson brought out a fiddle and played surprisingly well, and the cowboys pushed back the furniture to make room for dancing. Samuel bowed formally to Katherine and asked, "May I have this dance?" Katherine's heart hammered as she placed her hand in his. She had never danced before, never had the opportunity to learn. "I do not know how," she confessed. "I will teach you," Samuel said, pulling her close. "Just follow my lead." He waltzed her around the room, guiding her through the steps with patience and skill. Katherine stumbled at first, stepping on his toes and apologizing, but Samuel just laughed and encouraged her to keep trying. By the third song, she was starting to get the rhythm, and by the fourth, she was actually enjoying herself, breathless and smiling as Samuel spun her across the floor. "You are a natural," Samuel said, his hand warm at her waist. "You are a flatterer," Katherine replied, but she was smiling. For the first time since her father's death, she felt something other than grief. She felt alive, present in the moment, aware of Samuel's hand holding hers and the warmth of his body close to hers. When the music ended, Samuel did not immediately release her. They stood together in the crowded room, breathing hard from the exertion of dancing. looking at each other with expressions that made Clara Henderson smile knowingly from across the room. "Katherine," Samuel began, but before he could continue, one of the other cowboys interrupted, asking Katherine for the next dance. She went with him out of politeness, but she missed Samuel's presence immediately, missed the way he held her like she was something precious. Later that night, after the party had ended and the cowboys had returned to the bunkhouse, Katherine stood on the front porch looking at the stars. The night was crystal clear and bitterly cold, the stars so bright and numerous they looked like diamonds scattered across black velvet. She heard footsteps behind her and knew without turning that it was Samuel. "Beautiful night," he said, coming to stand beside her. "Yes," Katherine agreed. "My father used to say that winter stars were brighter than summer ones. I do not know if that is true, but they certainly seem that way." "Katherine, I need to tell you something," Samuel said, his voice serious. "I know it has only been a few weeks since your father passed, and I know this might not be the right time, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel what I feel." Katherine turned to face him, her heart pounding. "What do you feel?" Samuel took her hands, his grip warm even through the cold. "From the moment I saw you in that cemetery, something changed for me. I thought I knew what I wanted from life, but meeting you made me realize I had been looking at it all wrong. I do not just want a ranch and a comfortable life. I want someone to share it with, someone smart and strong and brave, someone exactly like you." "Samuel," Katherine breathed, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "I am not asking for anything right now," Samuel continued quickly. "You need time to grieve, to heal, to figure out what you want. But I want you to know that I am here and I am not going anywhere. I mean to court you properly, Katherine Calloway, if you will allow it. I mean to win your heart, if it is not too presumptuous to hope I might have a chance." Katherine felt tears welling up, but they were not tears of grief this time. They were tears of something she had not expected to feel again, joy. "You already have a chance," she whispered. "More than a chance." "Samuel, I have been trying not to feel too much, trying to honor my father's memory properly, but I cannot help it. When I am with you, I feel happy. I feel hope. I feel like maybe the future could be something good instead of just something to survive." Samuel pulled her closer, his hands moving from hers to cup her face gently. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Or is it too soon?" "It is probably too soon," Katherine admitted, "but I do not care. Kiss me, Samuel." He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but Katherine had never been more certain of anything. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet and perfect. She had never been kissed before, had never even imagined it would feel like this. Like coming home. Like finding something she had not known she was missing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to keep my promise," he said. "I am going to plant so much joy in your life that you forget what sorrow felt like. I swear it, Katherine." "I believe you," Katherine said, and she did. For the first time in her life, she believed the future held something better than hardship and loss. She believed in Samuel's promises, and more importantly, she believed in the feelings growing between them. They stood together on the porch until the cold drove them inside, hands clasped, dreaming about what might come next. The winter deepened, and with it, the relationship between Katherine and Samuel grew. They spent every possible moment together, stealing conversations in the hallway, walking together in the evening after Katherine's work was done, sitting close by the fire while the wind howled outside. Samuel courted her with old-fashioned propriety, always respectful, always mindful of her recent loss, but the heat between them was undeniable. In early January, Samuel sat Katherine down in the parlor one evening and pulled out a small notebook filled with careful sketches and notes. "I want to show you something," he said. I've been working on this for years, adding to it whenever I get an idea. Katherine took the notebook and began paging through it. The sketches showed plans for a ranch house, not large but well designed, with a big kitchen and a stone fireplace. Other pages detailed barn layouts, corral designs, and pasture management strategies. There were notes about breeding programs for cattle, calculations of costs and potential profits, even sketches of furniture and household items. "This is remarkable," Katherine said, genuinely impressed. "You have thought of everything." "I have had a lot of time to think," Samuel said with a self-deprecating smile. "All those lonely nights in bunkhouses, watching other men's dreams while having none of my own except what I could put on paper. But Katherine, I want you to understand something. These plans, this dream, it is not complete. It is missing the most important part." "What is that?" Katherine asked, though her heart already knew the answer. "You," Samuel said simply. "I drew that house imagining a wife and children filling it. I planned that ranch thinking about building something to pass down to future generations. But it was all abstract before. Now when I look at these pages, I see you in that kitchen. I see our children playing in the yard. I see us growing old together on land we built with our own hands." Katherine's throat tightened with emotion. "That is a beautiful dream, Samuel. It could be more than a dream," Samuel said, taking her hand. "I have been saving my wages for years. I have almost $800 put aside. That is enough to file a claim on government land, buy some starter cattle, and build a small house. It would not be easy, especially the first few years, but we could do it. Together." "Are you asking what I think you are asking?" Katherine whispered. Samuel slid off the couch and knelt before her, still holding her hand. "Katherine Calloway, I know it has only been 6 weeks since your father died, and I know by any proper measure I should wait longer. But life on the frontier does not always allow for proper measures. I love you. I think I started loving you the moment I saw you kneeling by that grave, so heartbroken but so strong. I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. I want to keep the promise I made in the cemetery, to plant joy where there has been sorrow. Will you marry me?" Katherine looked down at Samuel, this good man who had appeared in her darkest hour and shown her that hope still existed in the world. 6 weeks ago she had been utterly alone, believing she had nothing left to live for. Now she had a man who loved her, a future spread out before them like an unwritten book, and a heart so full of hope and happiness she thought it might burst. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Samuel, I will marry you." Samuel surged up and kissed her deeply, joyfully, lifting her off the couch and spinning her around. When he set her down, they were both laughing and crying at once, overwhelmed by the enormity of what they had just committed to. Clara Henderson, who had been conveniently dusting in the hallway and had undoubtedly heard everything, appeared with a smile and congratulations. "It is about time," she said, pulling Katherine into a hug. "Robert and I have been waiting for Samuel to get up the courage to ask." "You knew?" Katherine asked, surprised. "Everyone knew," Clara said with a laugh. "You two have not exactly been subtle about your feelings. When are you planning to marry?" Samuel and Katherine looked at each other, realizing they had not discussed timing. "Spring," Katherine suggested tentatively. "Why wait?" Samuel asked. "I mean, if you want a big wedding with lots of planning, I understand. But if you are willing, we could marry as soon as the circuit preacher comes through. He should be here in about 3 weeks. 3 weeks, Katherine repeated, her mind spinning. It seemed impossibly fast and yet not fast enough. She wanted to be Samuel's wife, wanted to start their life together, wanted to stop sleeping in separate rooms and playing at propriety when all she wanted was to be close to him. "Is that improper?" Samuel asked, suddenly worried. "We can wait if you prefer. I do not want to rush you into anything." "No," Katherine said firmly. 3 weeks is perfect. I do not need an elaborate wedding, Samuel. I just need you. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Katherine made herself a simple wedding dress from fabric Clara helped her purchase in town, stitching late into the night by lamplight. Samuel rode into Ruby City and spoke with the land office, filing a claim on 160 acres of government land about 15 miles from the Clearwater Ranch. He drew up plans for a small house they could build before winter returned, calculating costs and making lists of needed supplies. The Hendersons agreed to let Katherine continue working until the wedding, but Robert pulled Samuel aside one evening for a private conversation. When Samuel emerged, he looked dazed and happy. "Robert is giving us a wedding gift," Samuel told Katherine later, his voice full of wonder. "He is selling me 10 head of breeding cows and a bull at half price, with payment to be made after we sell our first calves. He said it was his way of honoring the help your father gave him years ago." Katherine felt tears well up again. She seemed to cry constantly these days, but they were good tears, happy tears, tears of gratitude for the unexpected kindness of others. "We are so lucky," she said, "to have found such good people." "We are lucky to have found each other," Samuel corrected, pulling her into his arms. "The Hendersons are kind, and I am grateful for their help, but none of it would matter without you. You are my luck, Katherine. You are my joy." The circuit preacher, a weathered man named Reverend Michaels, arrived at the Clearwater Ranch on the last Sunday of January. The wedding was held in the ranch house parlor with the Hendersons and all the ranch hands in attendance. Katherine wore her new dress, simple but elegant, and carried a small bouquet of dried flowers Clara had saved from the previous summer. Samuel wore his best clothes, scrubbed clean and nervous, waiting at the front of the room as Katherine walked toward him. When their eyes met, everything else faded away. There was only the two of them, making promises that would bind their lives together. "Do you, Samuel Quinton, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" "I do," Samuel said clearly, his storm-colored eyes never leaving Katherine's face. "And do you, Katherine Calloway, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" "I do," Katherine said, her voice strong despite the tears flowing freely down her face. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you man and wife. Samuel, you may kiss your bride." Samuel cupped Katherine's face in his hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs before lowering his lips to hers in a kiss that sealed their promises. The small gathering erupted in applause and cheers, and Katherine felt herself laughing against Samuel's mouth, giddy with happiness and the sheer impossibility of how much her life had changed in the space of 2 months. The wedding celebration lasted into the evening, with Clara producing a remarkable meal and Robert breaking out bottles of whiskey he had been saving for a special occasion. The ranch hands offered toasts and ribald jokes, and Katherine blushed and laughed and felt more a part of a community than she ever had before. When the party finally wound down, Samuel led Katherine upstairs to the room that would be theirs for this one night before they departed for their own land. Someone, probably Clara, had prepared the room with fresh linens and candles, creating a warm and intimate space. Samuel closed the door behind them and turned to Katherine, suddenly shy. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for," he said. "I know everything has happened so fast." Katherine crossed the room to him, placing her hands on his chest. "I am your wife now," she said softly. And you are my husband. I want this, Samuel. I want you." What followed was tender and sweet, two people learning each other for the first time, creating something beautiful from their joining. Samuel was patient and gentle, mindful of Catherine's inexperience, and she felt cherished in a way she had never imagined possible. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Catherine thought about the frozen cemetery where they had first met. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "About that day in the cemetery," Catherine admitted. "About how I thought my life was over, that I had nothing left to live for." Samuel tightened his arms around her. "And now I feel like my life is just beginning," Catherine said. "You kept your promise, Samuel. You said you would plant joy where there had been sorrow, and you did. You are doing it right now." "We are just getting started," Samuel said. "This is only the beginning, Catherine. We have a whole life ahead of us, a future to build together. There will be hard times, I cannot promise otherwise. But we will face them together, and we will find joy even in the difficult moments." They left the Clearwater Ranch the next morning, driving a loaded wagon toward their new home. Samuel had already built a temporary shelter on their claim, a one-room cabin that would serve until they could construct something better. It was crude and simple, but it was theirs. The land itself was beautiful, rolling hills with good grazing and a creek running through one corner. There were stands of timber for building and firewood, and the soil looked promising for a kitchen garden. Samuel had chosen well, selecting a spot that had water, shelter from wind, and access to the main road while still being remote enough to feel like their own private kingdom. "Welcome home, Mrs. Quinton," Samuel said as he helped Catherine down from the wagon. Catherine looked around at the wild, empty land and the tiny cabin that would be their home. It was nothing like the established comfort of the Clearwater Ranch, nothing like the modest cabin she had shared with her father. It was raw and unformed, full of potential but requiring tremendous work to realize that potential. It was perfect. "I love it," Catherine said honestly. "I love that we get to build this together, that every bit of progress will be something we accomplished as a team." The first months of their marriage tested them in ways they had not anticipated. Samuel spent long days working on fencing and preparing for their cattle, while Catherine struggled to make the tiny cabin comfortable. Water had to be hauled from the creek, meals cooked over an open fire until Samuel could build a proper stove, and every domestic task took 3 times longer than it would have in a proper house. But there was joy too. Joy in waking up together each morning, in working side by side toward shared goals, in falling into bed exhausted each night and finding comfort in each other's arms. Joy in the first green shoots that appeared when spring finally arrived, in watching their small herd of cattle settle into the new pasture, in every tiny improvement they made to their property. By May, Samuel had completed the frame for a real house, and they worked together to finish it. Catherine helped lift beams and hammer nails, her hands blistering and her muscles aching, but she refused to let Samuel do all the work alone. This was their home, their future, and she was determined to contribute equally to its creation. In June, Catherine realized she was pregnant. She had missed her monthly cycle twice and felt nauseated most mornings, though she tried to hide it from Samuel at first. But he noticed, of course. He noticed everything about her. "Catherine, are you feeling all right?" he asked one morning, finding her vomiting behind the house. She wiped her mouth and looked up at him, trying to gauge his reaction. "I think I am with child," she said quietly. Samuel's face went through a series of expressions: shock, concern, and then pure, undiluted joy. He swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet. "We are going to have a baby." he asked as if he could not quite believe it. Yes, Katherine confirmed, laughing at his enthusiasm despite her roiling stomach. Probably in late December or early January. A baby, Samuel repeated, setting her down gently. Our baby, Katherine, this is wonderful, frightening, but wonderful. Are we ready for this? Katherine asked, sudden doubt assailing her. We barely have our house finished. We have no money saved. How are we going to provide for a child? The same way we have provided for ourselves, Samuel said firmly, with hard work and determination and love. We will figure it out, Katherine. We always do. And they did figure it out through a summer and fall of constant labor. Samuel sold some of their steers for a decent profit, allowing them to purchase supplies and put aside a small savings. Katherine preserved food from their garden and from wild sources, filling their tiny root cellar with enough provisions to last through winter. They finished the house just as the first snows fell, moving into the two-room structure with pride and relief. The baby came on a frigid night in early January, exactly 1 year and a week after Katherine and Samuel's wedding. Clara Henderson had come to stay with them a week earlier, refusing to let Katherine go through childbirth with only Samuel to help. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Samuel, pacing outside in the cold, feared he might lose both wife and child. But Katherine was strong, stronger than even Samuel had realized. After hours of struggle, she brought their son into the world, a red-faced, loud-lunged baby boy who made his displeasure at the cold world known immediately. He is perfect, Samuel said, holding his son for the first time with trembling hands and tears streaming down his face. Katherine, he is absolutely perfect. What should we name him? Katherine asked, exhausted but radiant. Thomas, Samuel said without hesitation. After your father, he should know the good man he is named for. Katherine wept at that, hormones and emotion overwhelming her. Thomas Quinton, she said. It is a strong name. They settled into the rhythms of new parenthood, learning to function on little sleep and constant vigilance. Thomas was a healthy baby but demanding, and Katherine often found herself walking the floor at night, soothing him while Samuel slept so he could rise early for ranch work. Spring came again, and with it, new challenges and new joys. Their herd had grown through natural breeding and careful purchases, and Samuel hired his first ranch hand, a young man named Billy Reeves, who was willing to work for low wages in exchange for learning the cattle business. Katherine tended her expanding garden while keeping Thomas strapped to her back, talking to him constantly as she worked in the evenings. Samuel would take his son and give Katherine a break, walking the property and pointing out cattle, horses, and birds. This will all be yours someday, Samuel told the infant. Your mother and I are building this for you for your future. You will never have to drift like I did, never have to wonder where you belong. This is your home, son, your birthright. The years passed, each one bringing new growth and development. They added rooms to the house as they could afford it. Samuel bought more cattle and more land, expanding their operation slowly but steadily. Katherine learned to keep books and manage household accounts, proving to have a natural head for numbers that allowed them to make smart business decisions. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and everything about it. When he was 3, Katherine became pregnant again, and this time the baby came easier. A girl they named Clara after the woman who had been so kind to them in their darkest hours. 2 years after that came another boy, James. And then, 2 years after that, twin girls they named Rose and Ruby after the town where Katherine and Samuel had first met. Their house grew to accommodate their growing family, and their ranch prospered enough to provide comfort if not luxury. Samuel hired more hands as needed, developing a reputation as a fair employer who paid well and treated his workers with respect. Katherine became known in the area as an excellent cook and a generous neighbor, always willing to help families in need. On a cold December day, nearly 8 years after their wedding, Samuel and Katherine stood on the front porch of their home, watching their children play in the snow. Thomas was helping James build a snowman while Clara bossed the twins about proper snow angel technique. The scene was chaotic and joyful, exactly the kind of noise and energy that made a house a home. "You remember that day in the cemetery?" Katherine asked, leaning against Samuel's side. "Every detail," Samuel said, wrapping his arm around her. "You were kneeling in the frozen ground, tears falling like they would never stop. I remember thinking I had never seen anyone look so lost." "I was lost," Katherine agreed. "I thought I had nothing left to live for, and then you appeared and promised to plant joy where there had been sorrow." Samuel turned to look at her, his storm-colored eyes still as captivating as the first time she saw them. "Did I keep my promise?" Katherine looked at their children, their home, the land stretching around them that they had built through years of hard work and dedication. She thought about the life she had now compared to the life she thought she would have, dying slowly of cold and hunger in her father's cabin. She thought about the man beside her, who had loved her from the beginning and never stopped finding ways to show that love. "You did more than keep your promise," Katherine said. "You gave me a reason to live again. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose. You took frozen ground where nothing could grow and turned it into something beautiful and alive. Samuel Quinton, you planted joy in my heart, and it blooms every single day." Samuel pulled her close and kissed her, a slow, sweet kiss that still held all the passion and promise of their wedding day. "I love you, Katherine Quinton. I loved you from the moment I saw you, and I will love you until the day I die." "And I love you," Katherine said, "my cowboy who kept his promises, my husband who built dreams into reality, my Samuel." They stood together watching their children until the cold drove them inside, where a fire crackled in the stone fireplace and supper waited on the stove. Their house was full of noise and laughter, toys scattered everywhere and muddy boots by the door. It was imperfect and chaotic and absolutely perfect. That night, after the children were in bed and the house had finally quieted, Samuel and Katherine sat together by the fire, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. Outside, snow fell steadily, covering the land in a blanket of white. But inside they were warm and safe, surrounded by everything they had built together. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked, his voice sleepy and content. "About joy," Katherine said. "About how it can grow anywhere, even in frozen ground, if you have someone who is willing to plant it." "You changed my life, Samuel. You took my worst day and turned it into the beginning of my best life." "We changed each other," Samuel corrected gently. "You gave me something to work toward, Katherine. Before you, I was just drifting, waiting for something I could not name. You were what I was waiting for, you and this life we built together." Katherine tilted her face up to kiss him. "Promise me something." "Anything," Samuel said. "Promise me we will keep planting joy," Katherine said. "For ourselves, for our children, for anyone who needs it. Promise me we will never forget how lucky we are to have found each other, even in the darkest circumstances." "I promise," Samuel said solemnly. "Every day for the rest of my life I promise to plant joy with you, to build on what we started, to love you and our family with everything I have." They sealed the promise with a kiss, and then sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Outside, the wind howled and the snow fell, but inside all was peace and warmth. The frozen ground of grief and loss had indeed given way to joy, joy that bloomed in every corner of their lives. The years continued to pass, each bringing its own challenges and triumphs. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, cattle diseases and market fluctuations. Thomas grew into a young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did, while Clara developed an interest in teaching and began working at the small school that had been established in Ruby City. James proved to have his mother's head for numbers and kept the ranch books from the time he was 12. And the twins were inseparable, always getting into mischief together. Samuel and Katherine grew older together, their hair silvering and their faces lining, but their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened with the years, rooted in shared experience and mutual respect. They had built something lasting, something that would outlive them both. On their 20th anniversary, Samuel took Katherine back to the cemetery where they had first met. The weather was cold but not as bitter as it had been that December day so long ago. They stood together before Thomas Calloway's grave, which Samuel had maintained over the years, keeping the marker in good repair and the plot clear of weeds. "Thank you," Katherine said softly, speaking to her father's memory, "for raising me to be strong, for teaching me to survive, for holding on long enough to see me grown. I hope you would be proud of the life I have made." "He would be," Samuel said, his arm around her shoulders. "How could he not be? Look at what you have accomplished, Katherine. You took nothing and made it into everything. You raised 5 incredible children. You helped build a successful ranch. You have been the heart of our family and the center of our world. Your father would be bursting with pride." Katherine leaned into him, grateful as always for his unwavering support and love. "None of it would have happened without you. You appeared like a miracle that day, Samuel, my guardian angel in cowboy boots." "I was just a man who saw someone in trouble and wanted to help," Samuel said. "But I got so much more out of it than I gave. You were the miracle, Katherine. You and the life we built together." They stood there a while longer, remembering and reflecting, before walking back down the hill toward town. Their wagon waited on the main street, and they drove home together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. More years passed, bringing grandchildren and new joys. Thomas married a rancher's daughter and built his own house on a portion of the family land, starting his own herd while working alongside his father. Clara became a teacher and married a lawyer from Boise, though she visited often with her children. James took over management of the family finances and expanded their operations, purchasing additional land and diversifying into sheep as well as cattle. The twins both married cowboys who worked on the ranch, creating an extended family that kept the property lively and full. Samuel and Katherine settled into the comfortable routines of older age, still deeply in love but content now to let the younger generation take on more of the work. They spent their evenings on the porch Samuel had expanded over the years, watching the sun set over land they had claimed and tamed together. "You have any regrets?" Katherine asked him one evening when they were both in their late 50s. Samuel considered the question seriously. "Not a single one," he said finally. "Everything we have been through, the good and the bad, it all led us here. To this moment, this life, this family. I would not change a thing." "Neither would I," Katherine agreed. "Even that terrible day in the cemetery, the worst day of my life at the time. I would not change it because it brought me to you." "The frozen ground could not hold your tears," Samuel said, repeating the words he had spoken so long ago. "But it could hold the seeds of something better, something beautiful." "You kept your promise," Katherine said, taking his weathered hand in hers. "You planted joy, Samuel. You planted it deep, and it grew into something neither of us could have imagined." They sat together in the twilight, two people who had found each other in grief and built a lifetime of happiness. Around them, their land stretched in all directions, productive and thriving. In the house behind them, grandchildren played and laughed. In the distance, their cattle grazed peacefully. It was everything they had dreamed of and more, a testament to the power of love and determination, of keeping promises and planting joy even in the hardest ground. They had taken frozen earth, where tears fell freely, and transformed it into something alive and growing, something that would endure long after they were gone. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Samuel and Katherine sat together in the comfortable silence of people who know each other completely. They did not need words to communicate, did not need grand gestures to prove their love. After decades together, they had become two parts of a whole, perfectly matched and completely content. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and sage, and somewhere in the distance a coyote howled. Katherine shivered slightly, and Samuel pulled a blanket around them both, tucking her against his side. She rested her head on his shoulder, and they watched the night deepen around them. "I love you," Katherine said, the words as natural and necessary as breathing. "I love you too," Samuel replied. "From that first moment to this last moment and every moment in between. You are my joy, Katherine Quinton. You always have been." They stayed on the porch until the cold drove them inside, where a fire waited in the fireplace and their bed beckoned with its familiar comfort. They climbed the stairs together, moving more slowly now than they once had, but still together, still facing life as partners. That night, as Katherine drifted off to sleep in Samuel's arms, she thought about how much her life had changed since that terrible day in the cemetery. She had gone from having nothing to having everything, from being utterly alone to being surrounded by love. And it all started with a cowboy who saw her tears falling on frozen ground and promised to plant joy in their place. He had kept that promise, day after day, year after year, building a life of happiness and purpose from the ashes of grief and loss. The frozen ground had indeed bloomed with joy, more joy than Katherine had ever imagined possible. And as she fell asleep, safe and warm and loved, she sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the chance encounter that had changed everything. The seasons turned, the years accumulated, and Samuel and Katherine grew old together on the land they loved. They celebrated the marriages of grandchildren and the births of great-grandchildren. They watched their ranch continue to prosper under Thomas's management, saw their family name become respected throughout Idaho Territory, and then Idaho State after it achieved statehood in 1890. They lived long lives, full lives, happy lives. And when the time came, many years later, for them to be laid to rest in the Ruby City Cemetery, their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to honor them. The preacher spoke of their love story, of how Samuel had found Katherine in her darkest hour and promised to plant joy in frozen ground. He spoke of how they had kept that promise not just to each other, but to everyone they touched, creating a legacy of kindness and generosity that would echo through generations. Their graves were placed side by side, on the hill overlooking the town, not far from where Thomas Calloway rested. The markers were simple but elegant, bearing their names and the dates of their long lives. But more important than the stone markers was the living legacy they left behind. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their values and their love forward, keeping the promise alive. And sometimes, on cold winter days when the ground was frozen and the wind was sharp, visitors to the cemetery would swear they could feel something special in that spot on the hill. Not anything frightening or sad, but something warm and hopeful. The feeling of joy planted deep and growing still, blooming even in frozen ground, a testament to a love that had conquered grief and built something eternal. The story of Katherine and Samuel Quinton became the kind of tale people in Ruby City told to their children and grandchildren, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope could appear. That one act of kindness could change everything. That love planted in the hardest circumstances could bloom into something beautiful and lasting. And though the years turned and the world changed around it, that truth remained constant. Frozen ground could not hold tears, but it could hold seeds of joy, waiting for someone brave enough to plant them and patient enough to help them grow. Samuel had been that someone for Katherine, and together they had created a garden of happiness that flourished long after they were gone. Their love story was not the loudest or most dramatic, not filled with grand adventures or epic challenges. It was simply the story of two people who found each other when they needed it most, who chose each other every day, who built a life brick by brick and moment by moment, who kept their promises even when it was hard. It was the story of frozen ground that bloomed with joy, because a cowboy had the courage to make a promise and the determination to keep it. And a woman had the strength to believe in that promise, even when she had every reason not to. Together, they had proven that love could conquer grief, that hope could grow anywhere, and that happiness was not something you found but something you built together, one day at a time. And that, in the end, was the greatest lesson their lives taught. That joy is not given but planted, not discovered but cultivated, not guaranteed but earned through love and effort and unwavering commitment to the promises we make to each other. Samuel had promised to plant joy in frozen ground, and he had kept that promise every single day of his life. The harvest from those seeds fed generations, a legacy of love that would never be forgotten in Ruby City, Idaho, or in the hearts of all who knew their story.